She's on.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for showing up even through the rain. It's kind of an interesting format. We are live here. We are also live online through a Zoom and through Facebook. But just wanted to welcome everyone here, and I'm going to have Bill Rodier say a few words. He's here with St. Landry Parish Economic Development. If you don't mind, Bill.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, everybody that's online, taking some time with us tonight. Thank you for those here. We've got roughly about 8 or 10 folks here in person, other than the staff of APC and Economic Development that are here with us tonight. Really just wanted to, this is coming to you from the Economic Development offices on I-49 in Opelousas. Tell you just real quickly about how we got here over just a minute or two. We recognize that the I-49 corridor beginning at I-10 and the intersection at I-10 and going clear up through exit 27, which encompasses 12 exits, had so much potential that we may not be realizing all that potential. So with the cooperative effort of the St. Landry Economic Development Group, along with the Acadiana Planning Commission, we've come up with this I-49 Midway Corridor project, which is really designed to paint a future of this project that will, the goal will be to have this growth be smart growth. It's going to be sustainable. It's going to be a benefit to all of our communities, to our parish along the I-49 corridor, and take maximum advantage of having an interstate highway splitting the north part of Acadiana almost right in half. So a big part, obviously, the visioning process is to get public input with that. Katrina and her team at APC that have done a fabulous job of actually implementing this process will be walking you through, getting your input on what you'd like to see on the future of this, as well as talking to you in some more detail as to what some of the objectives have been throughout this process. So I would like to thank you all for participating and taking some time this evening. There's also a survey available that you could fill out that would also be very helpful to us as part of this process. But the big thing is a visioning process is what the vision of the people and the leaders of this area, of our communities and our multiple parishes see as the future of this project. So again, thank you so much for attending. Thank you, APC, for a great job of what you've done and all the work that's at APC.
Thank you, Bill. And also, we do have one of our mayors here, Mayor Charles James. I would love if you'd come and just say a couple words about the importance of this cohesive vision.
Sure. Good evening to everyone. Thanks for the opportunity, Bill and APC, to just talk just briefly about the importance of this. What I see the importance is, number one, it's planning. If you plan, it's going to happen. So by taking the time out to bring together the brain thrust in St. Landry Parish to put this plan together is a benefit to everyone. The other thing that it'll do is that it'll give everyone a voice. All those that are involved from one end of the corridor to the next, it'll give us all a voice in it. So the big, we can't claim that the big had the best and the small just got what was left. That's not the case. If this plan is going to work, then we all have to get involved. And I feel very good about it because we do have the kind of talents in St. Landry Parish that will allow us to set forth our future, the future of this parish, not just now, but for years and years to come. Thank you very much.
All right, now with that, we will continue on. We've kind of gotten an overview of where this project started, but I want to give you a little more insight into what it is that Acadiana Planning Commission does. So we serve the 7-parish region with a board of directors that are basically the parish presidents and police jury presidents for each of those parishes. And our job is to do economic, community, and transportation development for planning and implementation projects for those areas. Sometimes that work looks like building capacity for smaller municipalities that may not have the ability to do it themselves that might not have the staffing. Sometimes that means technical assistance from that aspect. And sometimes that means grant writing for funding opportunities. And some of our projects include this one. We've been working on some opportunity zone projects and a lot of other things in that nature. So that's just a little overview of what our role in this is to play. And we're really facilitating the visioning process, doing an inventory, and gathering the information to synthesize it, and then basically give it to SLED and present it in a manner that is helpful for the corridor's future vision. These are the project boundaries. We have them printed out in hard copy. Here in person, we will have them on the screen also in the webinar, just to give you an idea of where this goes. It starts at exit 7, goes to exit 27. And so we're looking all the way from Washington and even down to Karen Crow and some of Lafayette Parish. We have to look at the ends and the interactions of those parts of the corridor, because it's not just a vacuum. We have to do the connectivity as well. So at this time, I'd like to know a little bit about where you all are from. And we also have a poll on the webinar. So if you could just click where you are, where do you live in relation to the corridor? So if you want to just kind of say where, like Sunset, Opelousas, unincorporated Parish.
Sunset.
Unincorporated Parish.
Chairman Lafayette Parish Planning Commission.
Lafayette Parish.
Woodbury.
Woodbury.
Alderville to Sunset, Mankato, Sunset area, 93.
So we have a good spread of folks here, and that's what's really important to me. Can you close the poll on the webinar and just see? I'm assuming we also have folks from all over the place on the webinar as well.
In the Opelousas, unincorporated, some from Washington, Sunset, and Cancun.
Great. And that's really what we want, is to get the broadest picture. While we have, each place has its own important assets, we also want to see how they can connect to one another. So that's why we want a broad scope of people at this meeting. And next we have the real purpose of the corridor plan. This is on your next slide. I apologize, it's a little tiny, but we'll have it in a couple different places. So really, we want to promote connectivity between municipalities and the parishes, and then we want to have a cohesive and community vision for the project. We want to be able to create visibility along the corridor for development, for your historic and cultural assets. We want to foster collaboration and consistency between the municipalities too, because we want to play ball together. We want to be able to overcome any future challenges that we might run into along the way, while also looking towards what the future might hold for endeavors. And we want to also do this in a sustainable fashion, as Bill mentioned, so that we can keep this going in an upward and forward motion. And at the same time, we're also building an inventory of what we do have so that we can look towards the future. But overall, we want to establish a good foundation for the corridor plan moving forward. And I keep mentioning an inventory. We at APC have worked on inventorying all these things. So utilities and infrastructure, we've been in contact with the municipalities to get that information. We've looked at parcel information from the assessor's office. We've looked at land use, hazardous waste sites, drainage locations, historic assets, structures, and landmarks. We've also cataloged our parks and open spaces and public access areas, and looked at the local regulations in place and cultural resources, just so we have an understanding of where this starts. And so I wanted to let y'all know about those things so you know what we've looked at, but also want to know more about those things that you might think are important on a personal level and from a broader standpoint as well. So I want you to think about what it is that you have, and then what it is that you want to see in the future. Think about what makes your area unique. Think about what makes the corridor unique. Think about how that could look in the future and what assets that we could highlight or show in different ways that maybe the rest of the state doesn't have. And so really think about what is your piece of the puzzle as it fits together in the vision for the corridor. So we're going to start from a broad vision casting perspective and then move to a more narrow one. So a little housekeeping first. If you came in, you picked up a survey and there are blank lines, feel free to fill them in as we go. They're going to mirror the questions on our survey. So if you're participating online, there's a link to click so you can follow with us, or you can comment in the chat box. You can raise a question in the question and answer box. You can raise your hand and speak as well. So we have all these options to interact live through the webinar and through the survey online right now. You can do it later. It's going to be open till August 31st. So with that being said, our first question, very broadly, I would like to know what your favorite aspects about the corridor are. What do you find to be the most alluring appeal to the corridor? And to help, I've had people fill out the survey as we go, and so I have thoughts in case you all don't know where to start. The availability of land is one thing I have received as a comment. Strategic location to access.
I think transportation is key, and certainly we have access to that. I-49, 190 rather, and 149 running on right through the middle of the state, plus the railroad track.
Railroad track.
Services.
Great. And while I am taking notes, we're also recording this so we can go back and come through everything as well. So definitely transportation, railroad. I got a comment from someone that says the lighting. They like the lighting along the corridor.
In the chat on Zoom, we have a significant asset in the Zydeco Cajun Prairie Byway, and the landscape is appealing.
Lots of green space along the corridor. Anyone else here have any thoughts about favorite aspects? Ease of travel, robust music history, and good food. History, elevation, and land to develop. Let's see. Access to lots of different municipal cities. You can hop from one to the other all in the same day.
Small antique towns along the way.
Any other thoughts from the room?
I'd like to see like a place for kids to have something, like a big baseball field in one area where parents can have sports games or maybe championship games to bring in revenue to certain towns, like Sunset and Grand Coteau, smaller towns, but also, I mean, when you drive it on the interstate and you see these kids just having fun, you can build business, but you don't want to see just business. You want to see community involvement of games and things like that for these kids that live in that community.
Have a good balance
of both
business and green space. Any other thoughts in the room? Anything else in the chat box before I move on to the next question?
Let's see, I've got a comment. Your cultural assets are unsurpassed. The music and food are important to attracting visitors. Protecting your resources and keeping them sustainable is important. And someone else said, good for amusement park.
Right. So our next question is, how can you envision the corridor being an economic driver for the region? So that's a little different. That's looking forward instead of really looking at what it is that we have right now. A little both, but I have economic hub for the entire state, local shopping and increased business interests, recruitment of those businesses, tourism, music production and industry. Anyone in the room have any thoughts?
I mean, like, Appaloosa has the Yamblee building. You know, Grand Coteau and Sunset don't have anything like that. So you could have festivals and something like that, bring in people from all over. And maybe not a huge hotel, but a place for them to be able to have access to, you know, increase tourist dollars and amenities on that, so that, you know, you can have a festival and bring money in, and it doesn't have to be every festival, but, you know, just attract business.
We've got a comment. I like the hospital along the corridor, and someone mentioned recreational place.
I have also in some of the survey feedback, maybe an outlet mall, entertainment venues, meeting venues, maybe RV parks, retail, distribution, transportation centers, but also influence on arts and culture in the corridor. And then, of course, more traffic to the area would offer a boost to the economy overall.
Diverse industries along the corridor especially need fuel and food venues.
It's a good point. Food and fuel. I always like to think of when I'm traveling to Shreveport or back, and sometimes I get tired along the way, and where would I want to stop off along the way? And if I wanted to stop off here because it's about halfway, where would I go? So food places or rest places, things like that. Do you want to say something?
Well, I'm on the committee, so I want to try and listen more, but I think one of the keys to the towns is that when you talk about the food, you talk about that, your I-49 is a corridor for economic development, and it's very limited as to where the corridor is within the ranges. So when you talk about these entertainment, historic bills, we have to take our feeders, which 93, 190, into our towns and make sure that whatever we develop, whatever we do in the corridor feeds the inner main streets, so we're not affecting the main street businesses where the historic items are, the antiques and the restaurants. So having restaurants directly on I-49 may not be the best thing to have versus having that opportunity on the corridor to the downtown. And that's an economic engine when you're looking at the I-49 corridor for the manufacturing, for the distribution, for those employees who have to eat somewhere. But you have to bring them down our main streets in order to save the towns along the way. And I think that's something that needs to come out in this idea, because the corridor is limited. Well, you know, our corridor is limited to the I-49 service roads per se. And we did not extend into the main streets, but we have to develop towards the main streets. We cannot make the mistakes that interstate businesses have created in order and made the downtown die. That's pretty
I think
intense, but we have to put that as idea.
I think that's a good orienting statement, and that's why I want your feedback more than mine. You know, I just kind of prompting. I didn't mean to misstep there, but
that's what I want to hear too, is more. But it's just a.
No, I think that's great, and I think that's the strategic planning part of this. Hearing from you all what it is you want and how to preserve the important aspects that you have, while also bringing in the industry, maybe along the edges, things like that. But a good balance of the marriage of the two.
Because we've got any number of assets, as you mentioned, on 182 and 93. All of those orders will be fed off of that, off I-49.
Any other thoughts before we move on? Anything from the chat box?
Got a few comments. I was trying to see if anyone wanted to speak through the speakers meeting, but we've got bigger movie theater, access to outdoor recreation facilities like trails, parks, picnic areas, and rest areas. Frontage Road will be game-changing if we get land rights, mixed-use development that can be converted as time goes on. At present, it is an eyesore as far as appearance due to the overabundance of unregulated commercial development. They should have standards to adhere to for landscaping right along the highway would be nice. Yep, that's what we have in the chat.
Let's see if I have any more notes here.
I don't know if I may.
Of course.
I don't know if anybody has brought the mass transit aspect. We have the culture, we have the food, we have the festivals, as was mentioned, the venue, a centralized venue would be excellent. But not everybody's gonna be able to participate, so then from that hub, we need to go to these individual towns and communities to promote and give them the economic boost that they so well deserve. But at the same time, the centralized location for sports or for information, or I know we have an information venue on I-49 for tourism, but maybe jointly or collectively we can get together with our tourism groups to expand the opportunities of what we have along the corridor 190, 182, and all the other little towns that have historical value. Washington being one for sure, all of us do, but to a certain extent, promote that unity and that. I like to look at it as a hub and the spokes coming out of it from it. So the corridor would be the main driver because it's the main thoroughfare. And the junction that we live in, 190 and I-49 are ideal, east, west, north, south. So not to speak too long, just to let you know that that is something that can bring economic value to each and every small community as well as our larger communities along the corridor. So yeah, I think we need to look at that transportation aspect. And one other caveat I might say is that we are the only place in the United States that takes the gas that is accumulated from our garbage or from our landfill and produce gas with that. If we could promote that clean NCG gas as a driver for these transportation venues, we should be able to get some federal assistance and some federal attention on that as well. That's just an idea.
And please don't worry about speaking too long. We have plenty of time.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let y'all know that that's totally fine. Anything else in the chat before I move on?
Yes, someone made a comment, regulate the advertisement along the corridor with important needs rather than just lawyers advertising, for example, about culture on billboards at exits to give segue to e-reads. And another comment, if you're speaking, pronunciate, because we have this one microphone here, and we've got a comment that it's difficult to hear. And I've got someone who would like to speak through our speaker, so I'm going to connect them. Can you hear
This is Dwight Landry in Washington. Can y'all hear me?
Mayor, we can hear you.
Yeah, you're good. Mayor, we can hear you.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, you can hear us.
Yeah, we can.
Well, one thing I'd like to say about the corridor is that if we can use the whole corridor concept as a dictionary to list all of the things that are offered at each one of the intersections so that potential investors might see that at exit 27, there's this, and this, and exit 24, there's certain things, and might help to drive that economic factor for us.
Mayor, we appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think that's a good point. Good visioning idea of how to quantify different ways. And last broad question, this is the most fun, I think. If there were no limitations, nothing at all limiting you from visioning, nothing to do with finances or anything, what would you want to see? What's your dream corridor look like? What do you want to have? And I'll let y'all think on that and list a couple things. Manufacturing industry, more interstate exchanges, event center, more access, maybe some retail big box chains, and small businesses surrounding the larger stores.
Well, I mean, it's all great, but I mean, you also have to think on, I wanna see, believe me, I wanna see development on the corridor. But I also don't wanna see to where it's so overloaded with traffic into the towns that can't handle a surplus of traffic to where it becomes congested like Lafayette. I mean, you know, businesses are great, but don't overcrowd it, you know? A little bit of everything, it sounds good, a little bit of the shopping center and, you know, baseball field or, you know, pavilion for festivals and so forth, it all sounds great. But just make sure that each community, because we're not like Opelousas. You know, you've got smaller little communities and each town has its own community and cultural aspect where these people may want something at Sunset, but somebody may not want it at Grand Kentucky. So when everybody has, you know, their say in whatever you want to put in there, just as long as the community is great with it and they can handle the traffic, then it's fine. I don't care what you put there.
I think that, again, to highlight the important aspect of intentional and strategic planning and making sure that we hear from the residents. They're the ones that have to live there. They're going to have to go through the traffic and all of those things. And we want to make sure that you have what you want and this isn't just happening to you, that you're making decisions along the way of, no, we don't want this, or yes, we do want this.
So what has changed since the COVID?
Well, I'll be there
Training
tomorrow.
situation? Seems to me it's opening up a whole new realm of possibilities we may not have ever thought of initially. Some of those, or most of those, being ordering online. And the distribution for rural America is almost non-existent. If you read the article about Amazon and doing their distribution aspects, hiring FedEx and, you know, hiring the local, the big chain for the bigger cities, I foresee a possibility of opportunity here for rural America to capitalize off internet sales and deliverabilities, if you will, to mom and pops can have their own company and deliver smaller packages to certain area or realm and fill in that void that is desperately there. I know it's happening in larger metropolitan areas of the United States, but if you look at the map that they deploy, the South or the Gulf Coast region is wide open. There's no distribution centers. There's no links of the chain of Amazon, let's just say. It's a huge operation, but there's some opportunities for expansion with the land that we have to build these centers and to help boost the deliverability via interstate or just local. Just a thought.
Sure. Okay, we've got a comment from Miss Raquel Manuel on the Zoom, so I'm gonna let her go live now.
I like that emphasis on my name. Makes me sound fancy. Hope you guys are doing good. I was just gonna say that to the commentary about the fear of traffic, I understand the fear of traffic in a sense, but something to keep in mind is that Rome wasn't built in a day. So even if in this mythical corridor that we could be talking about in the perfect world, it's not going to pop up overnight. And as things come up and traffic does increase on a gradual and moderate level, that can and will hopefully produce tax dollars that could do things like repair current roads, which I think all of us are in agreement needs to happen outside of the main corridor. And it could also, it's going to, as the businesses grow and the tax dollars grow, it's going to allow these smaller towns to better emphasize themselves. And so it will no longer be an amazing best kept secret on the corridor, but it'll be something that can be shared and loved by people, and well traveled by people and appreciated by people. And those towns will benefit not only through infrastructure development and redevelopment, but through the mom and pop stores that, really struggle right now in those best kept secret towns. And I had a second thought. And I think, yeah, that was my second thought. So the other thing I was going to say is mixed use and space that can be, I guess, revitalized regularly, I think is key. So, yes, an event center, but an event center is something that is a large structure that can do lots of different things. Where if you go more specific, like manufacturing, you don't want to limit the ability of a space to just manufacturing one product, where if that product's demand changes, you may not be able to have a up-to-date or more modern facility there. So my goal and what I would love to see is space that is well utilized when it is first developed and also able to be revitalized as the demands and the economy changes.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Raquel. Then we have a few more comments in the chat.
I'm gonna bring it up.
Preparing for the third lane north and south as the traffic is growing, more culture center menu. The signs to promote the businesses along the corridor must be visual and eye-catching. Avoid storage buildings along corridor, limit of housing units along highway. And that's it for the chat for now.
If I can add, I think that having a cohesive signage or something like that that shows that there's connectivity would be helpful.
So is it currently mixed use all along I-49 right now, or is it, I'm sure there's some commercial, but is it larger mixed use or is it just commercial?
That's a good question.
So I always have to, Ken just reached over to me, I always have to present the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the fact that we have no land use in St. Landry Parish at this time at all. And we have no zone, well, we have some of the parishes, some of the cities have some sort of zone. We have no land use. And our biggest obstacle in this situation is to determine the land use of the I-49 corridor. Okay, so we want to address that issue head on so that we can have controls, or I don't even say controls, we will have a vision that matches our vision for St. Landry Parish. We'll use land use. The situation becomes that now you have individual property rights that will, in other words, this is my land, I want to do what I want with it. That's the elephant, that's the problem. But anyway, that's the big situation. That's the situation. So we're modeling, before you go off of that, we have looked at Karen Crow's zoning land use ordinance that they used to, and we've looked at that seriously. There are a lot of good features in it, and we're going to model some of that off there. But we have to address land use so that you don't end up with this nice development here that matches our deal next to anything that you can imagine that you don't like. I mean, everybody has a vision of what they can't stand, but other people make money doing that. That's their business, and you have to give them the opportunity.
So Mayor, when we did the planning and zoning, what was it, 2-3 years ago? Did we designate along Sunset our land use along I-49?
You zoned it, correct? But it's not but anyway, yeah.
So is it designated some mixed use, some commercial, or is it all commercial, or what?
Yes.
It's
Well, along I-49, to the extent that we own or their properties within the corporate limit, we were able to identify a specific function for it in keeping with the overall plan.
Problem with that is that Grand Coteau owns most of that interchange.
Exactly.
And we have we're not controlled in Grand Coteau.
Exactly.
So you see what I'm saying? So a St. Landry Parish land use is the only way that we're going to really get consistency.
It's imperative
throughout the parish.
Yeah.
And if we presented this to the parish council 2 years ago, before all this began, and they said, oh yes, let's do it. But this is why we're working on the critical part of one of the slides was the public records of who owns the land. and those contacts directly with them. But I'm getting too much detail. But bottom line is we have to address that in order to see the vision that
Well,
the
yeah.
public wants.
Because
See if I can't
I
help
thought
you
that
with
was
that.
already designated.
Okay.
And,
Let me see
and
if
I
I
mean,
can't help you
each
with that.
town should have a say into how they want their area used. I mean, they live there. You know, I don't want the mayor of Opelousas coming and telling me Sunset has to do this. You don't live in Sunset. If you don't
We're
live in
not, we're not
Sunset,
talking about the municipalities.
Yeah.
That's why we're saying we want to focus on the tabs, on the corridor. That's why we did not go into the towns. Yeah, okay, and
No,
I'm getting too deep into what.
No, I
this-
appreciate
You
No, but
have, so I'm gonna take you there.
I know, and that's why I say it's the elephant. It's,
You have, it's, well, this specifically speaking about I-49 in the corridor, it's very important. That project will not be able to get off the ground if you don't have some kind of land use for it.
That's correct.
But equally as important, and we spoke about it just a moment ago, when you're talking about the arteries that feed off of
yes,
I-49, and which, in my way of seeing things, especially when you talk about all of the municipalities surrounding I-49, that's the real benefit of having it there. Because that economic development that's gonna come off I-49 is gonna go right down 93, it's gonna go right down 182, and everyone's gonna benefit from it.
and then Sunset controls that development.
Exactly.
That's what we're saying.
and
In
that's
other
what
words-
I want.
Well, no, that's the plan.
Yeah.
That is the plan.
It's the only way it's gonna work.
I think that goes back to the balance of things and then having the hubs and the spokes and then
Yeah.
the connectivity of the separate parts. But I don't want to sound too cyclical, but in order to get to the land use vision, you kind of have to know what people want first.
That-
And
Absolutely.
then you can go to the land use and vice versa. It kind of feeds into itself. So
Correct.
that's why we're here today, is really to look at the visioning part of this aspect. But I appreciate the context, like that's real important for people to understand.
Okay, in our chat, we have a comment, have a transportation system for citizens like busing. Another comment that says, thank you for bringing up the land use problem because all of this is for nothing if not finally addressed. And then another comment, land use for guidance and cooperation between parish and city. That's our chat.
That's it in a
Sounds like,
nutshell.
sounds like the chat box agrees with me. So that's our broad vision. But now I want to delve a little bit deeper. So we've talked about anything that we want, but I want to get more particular to different specific assets. We have this, I don't want to call it a formula. It's a way of looking at, it's a methodology, looking at assets in your area. And this one is called the WealthWorks model. It was created by the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group. And what they did was they pulled out these 8 capitals, is what they call them, in order to really take a deep dive into your asset gathering and collecting. And so what I did was pair the ones together that I thought made sense. And we're going to go through 4 sets of 2 to look at specific assets related to individual, intellectual, social, cultural, natural, built, political, and financial assets. And we'll talk a little bit about what those things actually mean first. First, we're going to look at individual and intellectual assets. So those might be looking at skills for the workforce. It might be looking at mental health and wellness, accessibility, other community interests. And then intellectual assets would be education, libraries, higher education facilities, work readiness programs, and things like that. So what I'd like to do for each of these sets of assets, I want to look at what we have right now, what exists, and then what would we like to see in the future. So if anything pops into your mind, please feel free to shout it out, but I do have some comments from surveys already as well. We'll talk about existing assets first. I have here people who care and are knowledgeable. SLCC campus, health services, LSUE, a ready workforce, strong rail and highway systems. Anybody in the chat box have anything? Or anybody in the room?
We have a community college system is here to address industry needs, and current SLCC and OGHS, the South Campus Mental Health Services. And that's Opelousas General Health Units again.
Anybody in here know of any assets that are related to individual or intellectual elements?
Well, having a community college would be great near Sunset. Driving all the way to Lafayette for that, it's far. And there's a lot of these kids who live, like I was telling y'all in Sunset, who tell me that they don't have the job opportunities that they would like, or they don't have the skills either. So having a community college that kids could actually go learn a trade or something useful and, buy a home and have a family, it would just help them. I could see that. I could see a community college in our area.
We do have that in Opelousas.
And that's Opelousas. But I mean, either way you look at it, from Sunset, and I leave Sunset and I can go to Opelousas and I can drive approximately, I believe it's 16 to 18 miles. I can drive to Carencro and it's approximately 12 miles, maybe a little bit more than that. I'd like to see something in between. I don't think we should have to drive that far on out. And I would like to see Sunset develop with an educational, aspect of other than public school. I mean, we're trying to get the French immersion, the old high school, with a charter school for French immersion. And that's been so slow in going, but I mean, hopefully eventually it gets there. But something larger than just public school would be great in Sunset.
We've got a few comments in the chat. Sacred Heart in St. Charles and Grand Coteau. We have parks and recreation, but need to be supported economically. Technical programs, a sports complex. I would like to see LSUE included in the corridor in some form, and that was Miss Nancy Sorensen, the chancellor of LSUE.
Yeah.
We have a community college in Opelousas that services all of the area. We also have a lot of students from Sunset. And I just got online and heard something about Opelousas General Health. Do I need to report on something? Oh, and St. Luke's French Immersion in Arnoville.
You're familiar with St. Luke's too, right?
No, I don't know.
So that's happening too. So there's
things.
we're moving forward with a lot of good things.
And that's really, I don't live in the area. I need to hear those things from you all so I can catalog those things so we can show investors or we can show other people that might want to move into the area. So hearing those shouted out is very helpful, especially because I can go back, if I missed it in my notes, I can go back and play the recording and we're gonna catalog it all.
We have telehealth clinic in schools.
The healthcare industry is in dire need of quality individuals. My granddaughter has graduated from LSU as an RN, but just to say that if we could focus on our local hospital and the possibilities of utilization of it towards the oncology aspect of the business. Geographically, you look at New Orleans and Houston, in a sense. We're in between there. If we could coordinate an effort to be the go-to local oncology group by whatever method or means of working together with these other entities that we just mentioned, we need to capitalize off of that. It's very high in our area, very important for our local people, but it would also be a big draw from other areas in our north, south, east, and west, where they don't have to travel those far distances. And then secondly, there's a group out of Monroe pilots that will fly people to Houston or to New Orleans, but mostly to Houston, be treated and things of that nature. We have an airport here. I think we need to capitalize on trying to utilize it a little bit more. We could have that access to promote, to be able to bring some of our local people to these other entities until we can build what we need to build. But going back to the initial deal was training for the health care issue, and it's getting even more critical now than ever. So we're behind the curve, and we're just trying to play catch up. So
That makes sense though.
Yeah.
Connecting all the dots, saying this is what we want, let's get workforce for it. Planning in that manner would be really great, especially with the cohesive vision.
Yep.
We have one more comment online, and I do want to elaborate a little bit on this, but it says, I think it's valuable to consider the entire corridor as a sub-region with shared assets, rather than what each town doesn't have. And I think this is the vision that we're trying to cast here, that this is one corridor where you're trying to unify it and leverage the assets of the communities all along the corridor. So we don't want to think of it in terms of somebody doesn't have something. It's more of how can we leverage each of the communities along the corridor, and what do they have, and how can we build upon that to attract investment into this entire corridor, rather than just one municipality, but looking at it as an entire unified vision all along the.
Well, it's kind of like Opelousas. They already have an LSUE. I'm looking at smaller communities that don't have,
Right.
And I know kids who would love to go to community college, but they don't even own a car to drive to community
Right.
college.
But when you're
So if
competing
you have one
nationally, when
that's-
you're competing on a national level, people are gonna look at the overall corridor as a sub-region, kind of like was mentioned here in the chat.
It's all regional.
That's the vision that we're trying to create here, is a much larger geographic area that we can leverage all the assets. And it's what we try to do as Acadiana Planning Commission, is strive to look at the 7 parishes as a unit, and how can we leverage the value and the assets that each one contributes to the whole.
Any more comments before I move on?
Yes, we need a good transportation system as a common.
Thank you.
I've been saying that forever.
That's seven.
Yeah, if there's a bus system or something like that, that would help.
Sometimes we have to get creative about these things.
Yeah.
Think,
Well,
if we had
So-
all of the money, if we had all the things, what could we make? But go ahead.
So what happened to our bus corridor that we went to Acadia Parish, that we asked for St. Landry, that hasn't been funded again by the Acadiana Planning Commission? It's there, and I know it's
It's a complex project. that
I
can talk
understand
about
it's a complex
offline.
project, but there is transportation system in place that can be done for the I-49 corridor. And I've been asking for this for more than 5 years,
Absolutely.
okay? And it's old school, it's there, but it needs to be considered in this deal.
Yep.
Don't get me riled up with this stuff. She knows it. Rachel knows it.
It's gonna be integral in the development of I-49.
It has to. We have to bring those people.
Yeah.
I've always said, if the jobs are in the Port of New Iberia, which they used to be, the paycheck comes to St. Landry Parish. We don't need to create that every day if that's there. But it's an old story, but transportation is critical to our parish residents.
Absolutely.
To be able to get a paycheck coming home. And we need to spend money and do it.
Let me just comment for the record. So APC personally did not fund that transportation project. The Acadia Parish, that was grant funded through USDA. And so there is grant funding available for those types of projects. However, it's not a sustainable source of funding, because when you talk about transit is typically locally subsidized, the majority of it. Like federal dollars, state dollars can go to capital, like the actual purchase of the bus. When it comes to operations, you have to look to locals to fund that sort of thing. So
We can fund it with the LNG gas. You see what I'm saying? We
Let's do
have
it.
the assets to do this, just don't have the desire. I'll put it that way.
And we have some ideas
Okay.
that we can talk
But
about.
that's key to this corridor.
It is.
It's
Absolutely.
key.
It's critical.
And it's the connectivity that we're
Yeah.
talking about between the cities.
Yeah.
It's connectivity and it's there.
Yeah, that would be a big help.
Well,
But I mean, if it's been 5 years and nothing's been done,
no, a lot's been done. A lot's been done. I'm just saying that's.
One of the biggest
it-
things that we were able to accomplish with the
Yeah.
Acadia Parish model is breaking through the mold of allowing the city of Lafayette to operate outside of its borders.
Yeah,
So now that the model has been set and the precedent has been set, we can take that and replicate it. As long as
We've
the
made
political
great
will is
progress.
there.
So we learned a lot,
We
Yep.
learned a lot. We know what the costs are. We know what the numbers are.
but it's,
And we have Lafayette Parish is willing to work. City of Lafayette Transportation. So yeah, we've come a long way.
And I appreciate that. And I just want to point out that we
And
will
I
get to built assets in once.
Okay,
So
so
we're gonna kind of.
assets, and I want to bring this out too, and Rodier's not in here, Glenda's the only one in here, but maybe somebody knows what's happening with our master plan for the casino. Where are we? Anybody know?
good question.
So I'll just stop there. That is on their land. There is a master plan that covers a lot of what we're talking about that can be transferred to another large tract of land. And we cannot lose sight of that. We spent a lot of money to get that master plan done
That's correct.
for their land. We have to understand it's there, and they're dragging their feet with it.
I think Raquel might be able to answer. She's got her hand raised here.
Okay, go.
I hope this is helpful. So I regularly check in on this because my, constituents, regularly ask that question as well. It's a very common question. And my understanding, the last time I checked, now it has been like, I think during COVID, it has not been at the top of the barrel of things to do in economic development. But like a little bit pre-COVID, early COVID, we were still dealing, I think, with land rights and ownership. I say we as in I'm not in that conversation, but whenever I check in with Bill and his team, that's where I believe that we are. Now, don't quote me, even though this is live streamed. Don't quote me, but that's the last time I checked. That's what I heard, and I think that probably is one of the biggest battles. But I think that that's a good idea, which is that the work has been done. It's been a lot of work and a lot of really good asset building. And I hope that those asset building systems are utilized for this plan as well, rather than duplicating efforts. But I do like the idea that a lot of it can be transferred to different locations, but it always falls back to the land rights issue, which is why I think it's an important thing to talk about before we get too ahead of ourselves, or not to talk about, but actually to deal with and move forward with.
Okay, thank you, Raquel.
I realized that I said we wanted to talk about existing assets, but we kind of are doing a little bit of both, so I didn't want to limit the room to thinking that they couldn't dream about what they want also. So just putting that out there. Any other comments in the chat box?
Just for when Mr. Cimarol was making his comments, someone said they agree.
That doesn't happen too often.
Any other thoughts on individual or intellectual assets before we move on to a different category? Next, we have social and cultural assets. I think those are a little easier to identify what they are. Socially, we're talking about the Rotary clubs or nonprofits, churches or other religious organizations. Culturally, we're talking about festivals and customs and arts and historic sites, all kinds of things. And like I said, we did do an inventory of historic and cultural sites, but we want to know what pops into your head first when you think of those things. What are the existing social and cultural assets? Maybe along the corridor, or think about a different place than where you live. Where do you go to visit these places? Things like that. And on my notes, I have visitor center, local artists and festivals. I have specific places like the Bout Village and the tourist center. nobody listed any specifically, and a host of traditions and customs that are still being followed. Anyone in here think of anyone's group or any particular place as an asset?
The Herb Fest has always been such a great.
I think most of our festivals.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to any one of those.
Any one of those
the towns,
in their own unique ways to
I
promote
think that's
their
all
area.
across Acadiana.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
But
right.
each festival has something a little bit unique.
And
to
we're
offer.
unique
Yeah.
because not many people, no other place in the United States has things like that.
Exactly.
And we have one,
Global
at least one almost every month, so,
Shit, we got one every weekend.
yeah, or
Every
week.
week.
I know with COVID, it's been making things a little difficult, but
Yeah, we've
of
lost a lot this year.
course, planning for the future and
The,
wanting to continue to sustain these types of things.
St. Luke's, if you're not familiar with it, is going to be a great asset from the French-speaking world. That's already happening. That's being supported by not only Southern University, but LSU.
That's correct.
And, so it's a lot of outside influence on that thing, but that's going to be a school and a great training just a great mix of opportunity there. And Arnaudville does not have the ability to support everything that's going to happen in that town. So that will be a flow over, or whatever, overflow. I can't speak with this mask on. An overflow of necessities. So.
I think that's important because these are things we want to be excited about. And it sounds like St. Luke's is going to be a great opportunity. And it's going to reach outward for the French speaking, or not just in Arnaudville, it's all over the corridor, all over the south central region of the state.
I think they're already hitting an international market and they can only expound upon what they're doing.
Some comments in the chat. Raquel said our Chamber of Commerce was named Chamber of the Year for the state. And she also pointed out the Kiwanis Club, the 2.5 Rotary Clubs, political clubs, Opelousas Mardi Gras Association. We have a comment that says strong cultural economy. Another comment, Healthy St. Landry, an affiliate of Opelousas General Foundation that's working on improving the overall health of the community. Comment that says we have so many locally made and naturally distributed spice brands. And another comment, Cycle Zydeco brings loads of people from all over the country and outside of the U.S. We have loads of people that come to the corridor to ride our good service roads. And that's it for the chat for now.
Any thoughts from the room?
Well, besides St. Luke and French, it's also the arts that are being promoted there as well with the locals.
Yeah.
And I think that's an opportunity for expansion throughout our region to use that as a possible model or possible way or means to other areas of our corridor to promote the arts and as well. So they're doing good.
And switching gears a little bit, is there anything you'd like to see in the future with social and cultural assets? Here I have notes for festival grounds or a multi-purpose center that could be used for different types of things, for different seasons, not just festivals, other events. Someone said technology hub. Just more support for festivals overall and for events, bike lanes, and just more networking between the communities with festivals and works and events. One person also said more universal direction and cooperation to a single diverse goal, which I think is what we're trying to get at here, but maybe a couple different goals. Cigar spoke about too. Anyone in the chat?
Yes, someone said the refinery mission, Hope for Opelousas, United Way, CASA, and Sexual Assault Center, and then Fedstead Center in Grand Coteau at the 7 Mile Garage Sale. Okay.
So it's just events and organizations. Any other thoughts from the room?
I would like to see a senior citizens center built. Not because I'm a senior citizen.
It's because you're getting up in them years. And he's gonna need that bus transportation
Right.
too.
Right. Looking at creative ways to transport people that need to do things.
Am I wrong, or is there a big equestrian, culture here in St. Landry Parish?
Like, you mean the horse racing?
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
There's,
the question.
It even extends all the way up to Mills Road. I mean, I used to go, I used to work in a stable. And there was, Acadiana Racing, and that is closed now. But, I mean, some of them still own their race horses, and they still pull them all the way over here. And then there's Cambridge, isn't there the Cambridge place, where they let children teach them about horseback riding and all that?
Yeah.
You know, they even take children who are mentally disabled and physically disabled and introduce them to equines and,
Yep.
you know, the horses and everything to get them to interact with animals and teach them things. But yeah,
And then
there's a lot of
Copper
horse.
Brown Equine Center?
Yeah. I mean, we have an equine vet in Grangertote. You know, he's next to the Profi, and all he does is mainly horses. And then there used to be Stedman's, but I think they closed. So.
Well, there is your equestrians are here also, you know, and besides the races. And really right now, the quarter horses are where the money is, but that's another story.
Well, if your asset is land, horses make sense. Any other thoughts? Or we move on to a different category?
We don't have a culture museum around here. Is there? I'm not talking Opelousas. I'm talking anywhere below Opelousas between Carrickrow to Opelousas. I mean, Opelousas has a lot more that other areas don't have. So do we have a cultural museum or a cultural center anywhere around here?
There's the New News Art and Culture Collective in Arnoldville.
Okay, I didn't know about that one.
Of course, that's getting off the corridor a little bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's not anywhere near I-49. So.
True. A comment?
So one of the comments on here is concerning Opelousas General about helping to support the hospital a little bit more, to provide more services and provide better care.
Mhm.
All right. Two more major categories. So we're flying right along here. Next, we're looking at natural and built assets. So we're talking about our parks and recreation areas and also built infrastructure or needs in that area. What does that look like for fiber, for transportation? We want to know, what do we have now and what do we want to see? So I would like to know a little bit about some of our natural assets, particularly that you think of when you want to go exploring or camping or hunting or fishing. What are some of those places?
Well, we had bike trails, you know, that there was a guy who came to Sunset who was talking about building a bike trail, which would be nice for kids who, you know, own mountain bikes, and some young people in their 20s. They would love to have a bike trail.
Did they convert the old railroad trestle? They did not. Okay, but there was talk of that. It was mentioned.
Opportunity missed.
Pardon?
An opportunity missed.
Yeah, I mean, the bike trails.
Or can be revisited?
You know.
That land's been, I'm real familiar with that, you are too.
Yeah.
It's been converted back to the adjoining land.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was an opportunity, as you just said, that was missed. Yeah.
Opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it can't happen.
No.
And what I can visualize in the corridor is if you use some of this corridor space, what you're talking about, whether or not it's a sidewalk or an 8-foot wide corridor that runs along our corridor that also feeds into the towns. In other words, so you get, basically you're on the interstate and you're on a bicycle path that's safe, sound, lit well, works its way through whatever vision we have, and then it feeds, that's where your signage comes in, your small sign. So somebody's on a bike tour, or whatever you want to call it, starts in Washington and runs all the way to wherever you want it to. And it works its way down through each town, and each town is listed. That would be something that we could recreate in this corridor.
Absolutely.
But don't we have the Zydeco Trail that comes through Sunset? That's a bicycle trail that comes through Sunset. And it goes, does it come from Grand Coteau? Huh? Oh, it comes from Lafayette.
Is it the cycle? It's an event, correct? Yes,
Yeah.
that's a biking event.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and that
this would
runs
be
on the,
something more permanent, more
Yeah,
than just.
This
that's what
runs
I'm
on the
saying.
highway.
So we
That-
already have bikes coming to that area, so if we built something that would be like a trail or something that maybe,
you're asking to visualize something, you know,
Yeah.
that, because now we're dealing with the possibility of using some of the federal land, the service road, the right of way,
Mhm.
you know, something that we're not dealing with the private landowner from a liability standpoint, everything else that goes
And it
with
covers
it.
one piece of transportation.
But then you find that good piece of real estate that drops off, that's got some elevations to it that you cannot develop, that has some character to it, and then you create that camping site, that bicycle. There's, you know, and I know the people, and you know what I'm saying, we have that natural asset
Right.
that could be brought into
The
this.
rolling hills
Yeah.
is definitely
Well,
something
yeah.
I see when I
Yeah.
go to St. Landry.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can I ask how the internet is here? And along the corridor?
well, I think that's why we got that $5 million grant with Iberville Parish.
Well, hold on one second. Bill, didn't you just say that you were able to upgrade tremendously in this building because of what just came in? Internet, or not?
We did. We've got 290 downloads and about 30 some upload speeds, which is the maximum available to charter on. So we just upgraded to that.
And that's based on what just ran down I-49?
And that was probably here before.
Okay.
We charter. There's more options now. AT&T being here and Cox now just running up into the Perry Gilbo area. That's some additional line. So there's more competition.
There's competition now,
Yes.
which makes it's gonna be better.
It's working to the consumer favor.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully it'll drive the need.
Well, that's just part of the infrastructure that any company is going to need. They're gonna ask you that question.
Exactly. Any companies that come in, but also for the existing
Mhm.
businesses, things like that. Someone earlier mentioned the byway, the Zydeco Hidden Gray byway, which I believe is up to the east a little bit, but as a natural asset.
Okay, let's get caught up in the chat. Someone mentioned, I would consider the main streets of Sunset and Grand Coteau cultural experiences in themselves. Downtown Opelousas has a Fiddle Mania walking trail downtown. Example of everyone winning, the boroughs and Pittsburgh started fighting where the new airport would be built. They decided to share the revenue throughout the area. Someone mentioned creating a shoulder on roadways to allow for biking. Opelousas General Foundation put a walking trail in Opelousas Park. Opelousas has designated historic bike trail. Of course, there are 2 city parks in Opelousas. Not all culture venues need to be along the highway as they are available in our small town surrogate. So a call to go explore the towns. The Parish Tourism Center has an eco aspect to them as they are self-sustainable building and native plants display.
Mhm.
I think Bill had mentioned smart growth earlier. That would be an important key to this, and it would help with the sustainability aspect of natural gas. And all of those things are important considerations as we think about these kinds of things.
I see it as the connectivity between the towns. And then once you get into the town, you take over. But,
The gateway or the threshold.
yeah, from the gateway, anyway.
That's helpful for conceptualizing, if that makes sense.
You know, we have so much natural beauty here with our waterways and byways. Bayou Teche, you know, is the birthplace of Bayou Teche is Port Barre. A lot of people aren't even aware, and that's the headwaters. But what I'm getting at is that what that can drive is these other little communities can benefit from tourism or tourist people coming in. B&Bs, we're gonna need to get some bed and breakfast areas for these people to stay. but the cultural beauty that we have in this area is by far the best I've ever seen. And when you get into some of these bayous that are draping with Spanish moss and going through the narrows, and I think I saw Bill the other day in a canoe, it's beautiful, and you just get that anywhere. So those are some of the things, the uniqueness that we haven't capitalized off of.
There's a really unique sense of place.
Absolutely.
here in St.
In chat, someone mentioned the Jim Bowie tree,
Yes,
and they reiterated by Tesh, Fusela, and Cortabla. Catawba.
yeah, correct.
I'm from Terrebonne Parish. So
That's okay. We'll get you acclimated.
And what a lot of people don't realize is Bayou Fusilier is what feeds by Vermilion River.
Yeah.
And so that's a direct access which comes off the Tesh in on of it. So it's
I
kind of-
just think there's a huge opportunity for tourism and boat traffic or canoes, like I said, all along there, and even going toward the river, between here and the river, there's a lot of land that has that beauty that we're talking about.
Just to add from some of my notes from surveying, ecotourism
Yes,
specifically.
yes.
And then also a need for fiber infrastructure, have that here, widely accessible internet and broadband. Again, public transportation, that was mentioned several times. Smart development.
Well, there's a national initiative to drive funding down to the local area of rural America to boost the internet access. Are we getting anything from that at all? Are we seeing that from your group, or?
I think there's gonna be a unified effort, in Acadiana, not necessarily, there's funding through FCC, we've heard that certain providers are gonna go after. So I think in the next 5 years or so, you'll see a big.
But you
boom
guys
in
are getting,
expansion.
you're in the loop with the feds?
What, yes.
Okay,
We're in discussions with them.
good. That's what I wanted to know. A lot of money there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry.
I think it's important, that accessibility is real important, because if we have all these things, we want to be able to connect them to the rest of the world too.
Yep.
And so to bring them in while they're here, accessible, like checking out at a business, through the Wi-Fi to pay, things like that, are important and necessary as built aspects to this whole vision. Any last comments from the room or from the chat before we move to the last category?
yes, someone said we can also capitalize on our smooth ride home back roads that are so beautiful. Someone pointed out Bayou Tessin and Opelousas. The town of Sunset needs reliable internet. This became evident during the COVID stay-at-home order. And back on cultural assets, violin shop and brewery in Hardenville.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
I think you mentioned earlier about COVID changing lots of things, and I think it's just given us a perspective that we never would have considered about virtual options and access to internet, and how do we connect with each other here on a local level, but on a global scale as well. So
Yep.
looking broader in that sense. All right. Last major category. We've made it almost. This is the political and financial assets category. Kind of a hard one to describe a little bit. We're talking about government, sizes of your councils or police juries or boards of aldermen, things like that, and just being able to access the decision makers, tell them what we want and what role do those people play. And then also looking at the financial aspect of things. Banks, investors, incentives, like with your historic and cultural districts and other things like that. So looking at existing political and financial assets and what we want to see for the future. And so from what I have, people of course mention banks. We have banks, we have government offices, government agencies, but that's very broad kind of description. Anyone in the chat say anything yet?
Just a comment that they've enjoyed listening to the passionate conversation.
Good. Somebody's
No.
listening, that's good.
Now, you mentioned banks.
Yes.
My credit union is not allowed to come here. Is that, I'm assuming that's a federal issue, not, a state issue. But I mean, they aren't even allowed to put a credit union outside of Lafayette Parish. So how, if they're limited, and credit unions are usually cheaper for people, they don't charge as many fees as banks do. Is that gonna be an issue with other financial entities that would like to come here? Is, in other words, what I would like to know is, do banks have access to more broader areas than what credit unions are not allowed? Or what's the, I mean, I would like to see a credit union I don't have to drive 12 miles, from my house to access.
I personally don't know enough about the credit union aspect of things in banks, but I do know it often has to do with their connectivity too, because they've partnered together and they share things like that. But I don't know enough to answer your question on that. But I will note that as something to look into for sure.
Yeah, because they would love to service. They got a lot of teachers who, it's a teacher's credit union, so it's teacher's credit union, but the teachers say that all the time. They're not allowed to. We can't do anything in St. Landry Parish. We have to go to Lafayette.
That's in their charter. That's Lafayette Parish Teachers Credit Union?
No, it's Emeritus now, and they're not limited. I mean, they're open to the public now. So I mean, if they're open to the public, they should be able to expand to other parishes to service all of them.
It may have to do with their own regulations too,
Yeah.
like internally, the credit union.
Could
But
be.
that's me projecting a little bit.
I think a major part of the problems that we're having is that we do not have a plan. St. Landry Parish has no plan. And hopefully this will give birth to conversation and directives that will create a parish plan. And that parish plan has to be communicated to the towns and the cities in the parish, and maybe even, well, not maybe, making them a big part of the conversation. If we had something in common, something to go after in common, or something to work toward in common, I think we'd see a lot of our problems going away.
That's very important.
You're not gonna find a bank that does not want to invest in something that's investable.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to spend it, that's how they make their money. So I agree with you. The hesitation is not so much from the bank as it is from the investor who has to present something to the bank, and the bank says, I'm not so sure. That's the connectivity, but that's exactly what you're saying.
Well, I was talking, that would certainly be included in the conversation, but I was talking about an overall plan.
Mhm.
I'm talking about a development plan, land use plan, the whole works. We need to sit down in the dark room and talk about all of that stuff.
One of the comments that came in online is also from a political standpoint, is ensuring that we have proper access to elected officials to maybe engage in those types of conversations.
Yeah. That'll make them available.
There's another comment that says there are credit unions in the parish, and then someone mentioned we need a library system supported by all to help the whole community attract industry. And someone mentioned political capital, Gerald Boudreaux with capital outlay from the state.
Let's see, that's a comment I have in my notes here from someone. Capital money is available. It's really having a plan to go after it, and it can't be scattershot. It has to be very calculated and unified. And those are the types of plans and efforts that tend to succeed, is the ones that actually have something in line that could be tangible, and then you lay out how you're going to get there. So, also have a comment about willing to grow political climate, and that smaller town governments sometimes allow for easier access to decision makers. And I know that's on a case-by-case basis, but if we have an overall goal of accessibility to talk about this exact thing, that would be really helpful. And then I have here in the future goals, better aligned goals of individual bodies to achieve for the corridor as a whole. And again, that's why we're here, to look at this cohesively. How can we come together to make this better? Maybe having other political headquarters located here is proposed item. Banks collaborating together to work towards the business interest, community development, public-private partnerships. Anything? Programs tailored to helping musicians get their start, to maintain current venues or restore historically significant ones. And then just making sure that there's more powerful and more inclusive financial and political structures active and in place. getting better at seeking federal and state funding for community and economic development projects, local incentives that might drive investment or development. Making, let's see, more access to decision makers and more local incentives for loyal residents as well as outside investors. So looking at all the different angles inside and outside. Anything in the comments? Okay. Well, this was definitely the hardest category. Like, we know we have a lot of work to do in the political and financial assets area, but I think we know what we have to do, and that's really getting everyone on the same page, having tough conversations to really think about how we can be better and work together in different ways to move us forward. Really, those are all the categories that I wanted to go through, but I did want to leave a few minutes for general comments from anyone. Anyone in the chat room also is welcome to make comments, but somebody did say in the survey so far that it's really important to move forward without delay on this and to really get started on forming a vision and ideas and not just letting it sit. So working to improve the quality of life and economics of the area as we go, and not rushing into anything, but making sure that this doesn't go off the radar. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Okay. Any thoughts from the room?
Let's see, what is your first step to work on the land use after this seminar?
Might be a conversation offline. Yvonne, we can talk later.
Sounds like there will be conversations.
We gotta send Bill to the parish council meeting.
But I'm really grateful that you all came out in the rain from all areas of St. Landry and even Lafayette to come be part of this meeting. Again, this is being recorded for future playback. We have hard copy surveys. We've got surveys online. If you think of something in the next 30 days to go in our survey, contact me directly. My phone number is on your printouts. It's in all the emails I've sent out, and it's on here. So find a way to get in touch with me. You can also get in touch with Bill or SLED, and they can direct you to me. And
I just want to make one important comment for the record, because there's been a little bit of confusion, I think, when this publicity went out, is that this is not affiliated with the I-49 connector. This is a separate and individual project of unifying the corridor along St. Landry and in parts of Lafayette Parish to promote what's here along I-49 Midway is what we're calling it. So it is a much different project than the I-49 connector, which has been ongoing for several years. This is just north of that, including the I-10 interchange, and then going north of that. So it is completely separate projects for those who have asked or it has been questioned.
I think it's crucial that we do make this work. Because if we fail to make it work, take advantage of this opportunity, I don't think it's gonna come around anymore anytime soon. And time is of the essence, I think. So it's quite simply, the way I see it, is just a matter of folks sitting down, leaving themselves at the door, and being willing to walk in and talk about the things that's really going on. Let's fix that.
that's right, Mayor. We don't want to miss our window, but we also have to recognize that this might take a little give and take from everyone involved.
It's a big window.
Bill, I don't know if you had any thoughts. If you do, you're welcome. If you're not, I think we've had a really great conversation.
Yeah, I'm really, really pleased to hear a lot of the comments and the feedback that we've got. I think overall, they've been very positive and well received. My feeling is when we started this, we knew that this was going to be a little bit unusual. We hadn't really done a multi-parish, multi-jurisdiction as far as communities go planning initiative to connect all this together. So it's very refreshing to me to hear how well received this is from people and really understanding that there's a need. As the mayor said, that this isn't something we have an infinite amount of time to do, because if we wait for too long, our plan is going to be useless, because there's not going to be the growth will be here, and the growth will have dictated us by that time, and instead of us managing the growth coming forward. So we have a huge opportunity with this to make this Midway Corridor something really special over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and again, I would echo that. Thank you for all the people here thank you for the comments online. It's been really good stuff. And thank you for being here for 2 months. You're doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. And on that note, I think we're going to end online. But again, we'll kick out this recording or access to it so you can play it back later. And I will be gathering the survey.
And don't forget, we have dinner in the back.
Yes, sorry, I should have made you eat first. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you for your time on
Has it been presented to the LMA? Has it been presented to your local LMA group? Discussed or, I mean, besides just the mayors along the corridor,